Today, we are taking a rapid but really thorough look into an event that instantly became a flashpoint for American politics, for immigration policy, and, well, military deployment strategy.
Absolutely. We're talking about the violent attack on two National Guardsmen right in Washington, D.C.
And this wasn't just a crime story, was it?
No, not at all. It was, I think, a policy crisis just waiting to happen. Our sources, we're looking at legal filings, intelligence reports, official government statements. They let us unpack the specific facts of this Thanksgiving Eve ambush.
And then go deeper.
Exactly. We can examine the highly controversial context that put those troops there in the first place, and then explore the massive immediate national security fallout that followed.
So let's start with a central, really jarring fact. On Wednesday, November 26, 2025, two members of the West Virginia National Guard were shot, ambush style.
And this was just blocks from the White House, right at 17th and I Streets and WW.
We are looking at a tragedy that, fundamentally challenged the whole security narrative in the nation's capital. The human cost here is, I think, where we have to begin. It's crucial for the context. The victims were so young.
Yeah. Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, just 20, and Staff Asset Andrew Wolf, 24.
Both serving in the West Virginia National Guard, and they were on what officials described as a high-visibility patrol.
And both were rushed to the hospital. Critical condition. They needed immediate surgery.
Now, the specifics of the assault itself, they're pretty telling.
They are. The Metropolitan Police Department, they confirmed it was an ambush-style targeted shooting.
Which suggests premeditation.
Right. Premeditation against uniformed personnel. The weapon they recovered was a .357 Smith & Wesson revolver, so a powerful close-range firearm.
And the suspect.
The alleged suspect, a man named Rahmanullah Lakanwal, he was also wounded during the incident and was taken into custody right there on the scene.
The moment this news broke, the political reaction was just explosive.
Instantly. President Trump condemned the shooting in the strongest possible terms. He called it, and I'm quoting here, an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror.
And this wasn't just words. His reaction had immediate, tangible policy weight.
That's right. He ordered the deployment of 500 additional National Guard troops. Just like that.
That's one major policy response. But there was a second one, and arguably it was even more far-reaching.
Oh, yeah. That came from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS.
What did they do?
Within hours, they announced an indefinite halt on processing all immigration requests relating to Afghan nationals. All of them. Pending a security review.
Wow.
It just shows how quickly a local tragedy was leveraged to impose a nationwide policy freeze.
A staggering reaction. And that brings us immediately to the political polarization that, really defined this whole deployment. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, she focused on the violence of the targeted attack.
But Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman had a very different take.
Right. She put the responsibility on the policy itself.
She did. She specifically criticized the president's unwarranted decision to deploy National Guard troops to D.C., basically arguing that the deployment itself created the dangerous scenario.
That it put those soldiers in harm's way?
Exactly. For a mission that many people were already arguing was completely unnecessary. This incident, it just became ammunition for both sides.
And this whole political debate really hinges on the profile of the alleged shooter, Rahmanullah Lakanwal. He's a 29-year-old Afghan national. And what our sources reveal about how he got into the U.S. is, well, it's deeply contradictory.
And that's why it all became so politicized so quickly. What's fascinating here is that Lakanwal wasn't some random migrant. He entered the U.S. back in 2021.
Under Operation Allies Welcome.
Yes, OEW.
Yeah.
And that program was set up specifically for Afghans who had provided critical help to the U.S. military and diplomatic efforts after the Taliban takeover.
And the connection here runs really deep. We have a source, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who stated that Lakanwal was admitted explicitly because of his prior work with the U.S. government, including CIA.
As a member of a partner force in Kandahar.
I mean, that completely scrambles the easy narrative.
It does. He wasn't just screened. He was previously vetted, affiliated.
Right.
He was considered an ally whose life the U.S. was basically obligated to save.
So this complicates the idea that it was simply a vetting failure under the previous administration.
Exactly. According to an anonymous official, Lakanwal, who was living up in Bellingham, Washington, had no known criminal history before this.
But let's look at the timeline, because this is key. He applied for asylum in December 2024.
Right.
And he was officially approved in April 2025. That approval came 3 months after President Trump's administration took office.
That procedural fact is so important. It completely undercuts any political attempt to just point fingers at the initial 2021 entry process.
The system, across 2 different administrations, processed and approved his status.
It raises a profound question. If a person had a proven high-level intelligence affiliation, but still posed a risk, does that mean the vetting failed on entry? Or during the asylum review? Or, did something else happen while he was living here?
Right, like radicalization. It pushes the debate past simple partisan blame. Legal action was, of course, swift. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced very serious charges. Assault with intent to kill while armed.
And she made a point of saying she would seek terrorism charges and potentially the death penalty or life in prison if the soldiers died.
And that escalation to terrorism charges is what justifies this intense focus on his background.
And of course, Vice President J.D. Vance seized on it immediately, arguing it justified re-examining, maybe even removing all Afghan immigrants who entered under OEW.
Which is, the scale of that would be enormous.
Huge. We're talking about approximately 200,000 Afghan immigrants and refugees who came to the U.S. after August 2021. And the process for them was already designed to be rigorous.
Can you just remind us what that vetting process actually involved? Because shutting down all Afghan requests implies a total systemic failure.
Sure. The sources say OEW involved a multi-layered screening process. It included biometric and biographic vetting by, well, not just the State Department.
But intelligence agencies, too.
Yes, the FBI, the National Counterterrorism Center, and others. The fact that an individual with a CIA affiliation could allegedly do this, despite that multi-layered scrutiny, is why the policy reaction was so severe.
Okay, so now we have to zoom out. Why were Specialist Beckstrom and Staff Street-Wolf even on that patrol, just blocks from the White House, on November 26th?
The answer lies in Executive Order 14333. It was issued months earlier.
On August 11th, 2025?
That's the one. President Trump issued the order, titled Declaring a Crime Emergency in the District of Columbia. And it was a historically aggressive move.
How so?
Because for the first time ever, it invoked Section 740 of the D.C. Home Rule Act.
And that's a critical procedural detail. Invoking the Home Rule Act let the federal government basically take control of the Metropolitan Police Department, the MPDC.
Right. And while the full federalization part expired after a month, the troop deployment itself just kept getting extended over and over, keeping thousands of Guard members on the streets right up until this shooting.
The justification for all of this was rampant crime in D.C.
That was the asserted reason. But here's the major point of contention, where the data just doesn't line up with the mission.
What did the data show?
City and federal statistics showed that violent crime in D.C. was actually at a 30-year low and had been declining through 2024 and 2025.
So the entire premise of the emergency declaration was based on contested, if not misleading, information.
It looks that way, the assertion of a crime emergency, even as statistics suggested the opposite.
Which leads you to question the motivation. The forces deployed included, the D.C. National Guard, but also guards from 6 Republican-led states.
Ohio, South Carolina, West Virginia, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. And the analysis in our sources really points to this as a primary indicator of political motivation. Analysts show that many cities in those very states sending troops
had higher crime rates themselves.
Exactly. Higher documented crime rates than D.C. It really suggested more of a public relations exercise, projecting an image of federal control rather than addressing an actual spiking security crisis.
And if we look at the financial cost of this potentially political exercise, it's stunning.
The contrast is vivid. The sources estimated the daily expense of deploying those thousands of Guard troops was 4.3 times greater than the daily cost of operating public housing for D.C.'s entire unhoused population.
That's the social opportunity cost. Millions spent on a manufactured crisis, diverting funds and manpower, while core city services were comparatively starved of resources.
Yeah, a huge resource allocation failure.
And this deployment was met with significant public pushback. Protests like the We're All D.C. march. Right. But the clearest sign of resistance, I think, it came from the grand jury system. The story of Sean Dunn, this sandwich guy.
Oh yeah, the guy charged with a felony for throwing a sub-sandwich at a Customs and Border Patrol agent.
And the reaction from D.C. residents on the jury is so telling. The grand jury repeatedly refused to indict him on the felony charge. The New York Times called it a citizen's revolt.
A revolt against the crackdown and the perceived heavy-handedness of the federal forces.
But the most shocking element here, the legal cloud these soldiers were operating under, came just 6 days before the ambush.
On November 20th, A federal judge, Gia Cobb, ruled the entire National Guard deployment was unlawful and ordered it to stop.
This is the critical detail you really need to grasp.
It is. The judge immediately stayed or paused her own ruling to allow the administration time to appeal.
So the Guardsmen who were shot on November 26 were operating under a federal order that had already been formally declared illegal by a federal court.
But it was still legally binding only because of that temporary administrative stay.
Mm-hmm.
They were deployed based on an order the judiciary had already ruled was in violation of the law.
Which adds immense weight to Congresswoman Coleman's criticism about putting soldiers in an unnecessary position of danger.
It creates this profound ethical and procedural tension. The military forces were caught between an executive order ruled unlawful and a pending appeal, operating on the streets with a target on their backs, all for a mission that, according to the data, didn't seem justified.
Okay, let's step back and look at the larger picture of federal protective capabilities in D.C. This attack, so close to the White House, it forces us to confront how truly secure the Capitol is.
Especially for elite protection. And we have an August 29, 2025 audit report on the Secret Service Counter-Sniper Team, the CS team, which is, well, it's a very troubling data point.
The report is alarming. It reveals a crucial failure in how resources are allocated.
It does. The Secret Service Counter-Sniper Team, these are the people responsible for the highest level of physical protection for the president and vice president, was found to be staffed 73% below the level needed to meet its basic mission requirements.
73%. That's not just an administrative problem.
No, the audit explicitly warned this shortfall risked injury or assassination, and subsequent national-level harm. To cover this massive deficit, they relied on personnel working huge amounts of overtime.
And they were pulling in people from other units, right?
Right. Leveraging snipers from other Homeland Security components like Customs and Border Protection and ICE. So you're shifting these highly specialized people from essential border roles to cover presidential protection gaps.
While at the same time pouring resources into a politically controversial Guard deployment in the very same city.
It's a profound contradiction in security priorities.
You have this elite protection unit struggling, even cutting corners on safety. And here's where it connects to training. The audit found that some Secret Service counter-snipers who missed mandatory weapons requalification.
Meaning they hadn't officially proven they could still shoot accurately.
They nonetheless supported 47 protective events attended by protectees in 2024.
That detail is a sign of an agency under tremendous strain. They're forced to make compromises on core safety protocols just to meet the mission demands. It shows that D.C. security was fundamentally strained even before the Guard deployment.
So finally, let's bring it back to the legal implications. Jeanine Pirro announced she'd seek terrorism charges. This incident immediately reignited that whole debate about how we should try terrorism suspects.
The comparison is always between U.S. civilian courts and military commissions.
And the civilian courts offer the highest legitimacy, established procedures like SIPA for handling classified evidence.
But the downside is always security concerns and the complexity of dealing with really sensitive intelligence.
On the other hand, military commissions are often seen as faster, more efficient.
But they face these fundamental legal questions about constitutionality. Is the war on terror still a war that justifies military tribunals? And there are long-standing concerns about judicial independence.
So what does the analysis suggest?
Ultimately, that civilian courts remain the preferred forum. They have a robust legal framework and established history of legitimacy, and that's especially true when you're prosecuting a U.S. resident who has ties to the U.S. government.
That truly was a comprehensive deep dive. We examined a violent, tragic ambush that wounded 2 young guardsmen, Specialist Beckstrom and Staff Street Wolf.
We explored the suspect's profoundly complex background, a former CIA-affiliated Afghan ally who received asylum months into the new administration.
And crucially, we noted the victims were placed in harm's way as part of a highly visible military deployment executive order 14333 that was based on contested crime data and had already been ruled unlawful by a federal judge.
Yeah, the shooting just exposed these profound policy tensions. You have 2 sets of federal protective forces in the Capitol. The Secret Service counter-sniper team, protecting our leaders, is chronically understaffed, a 73% staffing shortfall.
And at the same time,
thousands of National Guard troops are deployed based on a contested legal order for a contested reason at a huge financial cost.
So here is the final takeaway question for you to consider. If the mission of the federal government is protection and order, How should policymakers prioritize resources? Should funds be directed to stabilize core elite protective services that are showing these severe deficits?
Or should those resources be poured into highly visible, politically driven deployments that, serve an agenda but lack clear statistical justification? The initial sources had one last startling detail.
What's that?
The daily expense of that trip deployment was 4.3 times greater than the daily cost of operating public housing for D.C.'s entire unhoused population. That dramatic contrast shows the cost of visible intervention often far outweighs the investment in underlying social stability. And you have to think about what that kind of funding misalignment truly says about our policy priorities.